The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with lights, voices, and pride. Hundreds of different beings sat in their floating seats, representing star systems scattered across the Milky Way. Some were tall and made of silver scales. Others had transparent bodies that shimmered like glass. They had gathered to discuss the most recent discovery, a small, noisy species from a blue planet near the edge of the galaxy. Humans. Reports had been coming in for months. The Council's surveyors had picked up transmissions from the Sol system. Music, speeches, and chaos all mixed together. It was the first time this primitive world had reached the level of space travel. To the Council, that made them a curiosity, not a threat. A tall, feathered delegate from the Varine race stood up, her tone full of mockery. "These creatures argue more than they agree," she said, her voice echoing. "They fight among themselves. They destroy their own world. How could such beings ever matter to the Council?" The chamber filled with laughter. Some members clicked their jaws, others hissed in amusement. Only one or two didn't laugh. A quiet representative from the water world of Solaran leaned forward. "They may be young," he said softly, "but they are moving fast. They build quickly, they adapt. If they ever unite, they could—" "Unite?" interrupted another delegate whose body looked like living stone. "These humans cannot even agree on how to feed themselves. Let them play with their rockets. The universe will forget them soon enough." The Council agreed. A motion was passed. Humanity would be placed under observation Tier 1, meaning they would be watched but not contacted. No trade, no aid, no alliance. In their eyes, Earth was just another noisy planet destined to burn out. Down on that same small blue world, the people of Earth had no idea they were being judged. They were busy living their lives, building cities, launching satellites, and arguing over everything from politics to sports. The first deep space signals had begun to reach the outer edges of their solar system, but few believed that anyone was listening. Still, something was changing. Small things at first. Shared research between nations, joint missions to Mars, whispers of a common dream. Humanity, tired of its endless divisions, was slowly waking up to the idea that the stars were no longer out of reach. Then came the day the stars answered back. A transmission, faint but undeniable, reached Earth's deep space array in Australia. It wasn't a natural signal. It was structured, mathematical, deliberate. The message was simple. "We are aware of you." The world went silent. Governments called emergency meetings. Scientists worked day and night to decode the rest of the signal, but that single phrase was enough to change everything. Religion, science, and philosophy all collided in one instant. For the first time in history, every person on Earth knew beyond doubt that humanity was not alone. The news spread faster than light could travel, and with it came both hope and fear. Some wanted to welcome the unknown visitors, others warned that the galaxy might not be friendly. The Galactic Council, watching from afar, debated again. A pale, insect-like ambassador from the Korthic Dominion raised its spiny hand. "The humans have detected the signal," it said. "Should we prepare contact protocols?" The Varine delegate scoffed. "For what purpose? To waste our time on primitives who barely understand fusion? Perhaps it would be wise to guide them," another said. "A young race with ambition can become dangerous." "Dangerous?" The hall erupted in laughter again. "They are flesh and bone. Their ships use chemical fire. They are nothing." The Council moved on to more important matters: border disputes, trade routes, and mineral rights. Earth was just a footnote in their endless bureaucracy. Back on Earth, though the story was only beginning, within months, world leaders formed an emergency coalition called the Global Space Defense Initiative. It wasn't just about defense, and it was about preparation. If someone out there knew about humanity, Earth needed to be ready. For the first time, rival nations shared technology without demanding anything in return. New space programs began. Artificial intelligence systems designed to control satellites were repurposed to analyze alien patterns. Quantum engines were built in secret labs under the deserts and oceans. Within 10 years, humanity's technology had advanced more than it had in the last 100. The Galactic Council barely noticed. In their grand chambers, surrounded by holographic star maps, the delegates spoke of empires that had existed for thousands of years. To them, a decade meant nothing. They saw humanity's progress as the clumsy steps of children pretending to walk among giants. "They're just humans. one of them said again during a later meeting, as reports came in of Earth's first faster-than-light prototype. They will burn themselves out before they reach our borders, and yet, deep inside, a few council members began to wonder if they were wrong. On Earth's moon, a construction site the size of a city glowed with blue energy. It was the Sol Gate, a human-built jump gate capable of bending space-time. Scientists, engineers, and workers from every nation lived together in the moon's low gravity, sharing ideas, laughter, and stories. They had stopped calling themselves by nationality. They were simply from Earth. One technician looked out over the stars each night during his short break. "Do you ever think," he said to his partner, "that maybe someone up there is watching us right now?" She smiled. "If they are, I hope they're impressed." For the first time in human history, the people of Earth were united by curiosity rather than fear. And somewhere beyond the rim of known space, the Galactic Council's scanners detected something unexpected. A wave of energy from Sol's direction, unlike anything in their archives. They ignored it at first. They always did, but the energy wave didn't fade, it grew. And with it came faint signals, patterns of communication, navigation codes, and ship transmissions. The humans were no longer confined to their home system. They were spreading outward. In the council hall, silence filled the room when the readings arrived. "How is that possible?" asked one delegate. "They had barely discovered FTL theory a few cycles ago. They shouldn't be capable of this," another said. "It's unnatural. They are improvising," said the water being from Silaran again. His tone was not mocking now, but thoughtful. "Humans do not follow the rules we expect them to." Still, the majority dismissed him. The council voted not to intervene. After all, humans had not crossed any galactic borders. They were still far away, and the council had far older problems to manage. Down on Earth, people kept building. The first jump was a success. A small fleet made it to Proxima Centauri and back. The crews returned with samples, maps, and stories of wonder. Children grew up dreaming not of countries, but of stars. And in quiet corners of the planet, older scientists smiled, remembering the first alien signal that had changed everything. Humanity had not just survived its chaos, it had learned from it. Each argument, each mistake, each failure had taught them something. Their history of conflict had turned into experience, their curiosity into power. They were still flawed, still emotional, still human, but they were no longer small. While the Galactic Council sat in its grand halls, secure in its arrogance, the people of Earth were looking outward and upward, with a determination no alien civilization could understand. They didn't know that the Council had laughed at them. They didn't know they were considered just humans, but they were about to show the galaxy what being human really meant, and far across the stars, a faint warning reached the Council's listening posts. One of their border outposts had gone dark. The last transmission before static swallowed it carried a single line of text. "Unknown ships detected. Human origin confirmed." The Galactic Council gathered again, their laughter gone. For the first time in centuries, they felt something they had almost forgotten: worry. For years, the Galactic Council had ignored the small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. They believed the humans would stay quiet in their corner, busy with their little machines and dreams. But the universe has a way of surprising those who stop paying attention. It started quietly, a simple accident in the outer zones. A human exploration ship called Pathfinder 1 had been testing a new jump system near the edge of known space. It was supposed to be a routine test. The crew was calm, their voices light and hopeful as they prepared to make history again. But just as they entered the jump field, something went wrong. The ship emerged not in empty space, but in the middle of a region claimed by the Dravic Dominion, a powerful empire that had been part of the Galactic Council since the beginning. The Dravic were proud, territorial, and ruthless about their borders. When their patrol ships saw the human vessel appear, they didn't send a greeting or warning. They saw it as an invasion. Seconds later, the Pathfinder 1 disappeared from the Dravic scanners, destroyed before anyone could explain what had happened. The news spread across the stars like wildfire. On Earth, the entire planet watched the broadcast of the lost crew's final transmission, a broken message filled with static and panic. People felt shock, grief, and confusion. No one knew who the attackers were or why it had happened. Within days, the United Earth Coalition called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every continent gathered in one place. For the first time, no one argued about politics or money. The loss of Pathfinder 1 had changed everything. Humanity realized they were no longer alone, and not everyone out there was friendly. A global decision was made. Humanity would no longer explore the stars as scattered nations. They would stand together. The United Terran Fleet was born. It wasn't a fleet for war, not yet. It began as a symbol, a collection of scientists, engineers, and explorers working under one flag. They built faster ships, stronger shields, and new defense systems. The world's best minds worked together day and night, sharing every discovery. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. They weren't just preparing for discovery anymore. They were preparing for protection. At first, the Galactic Council laughed when they heard about Earth's fleet. To them, it was ridiculous, and a new species building warships as if they could challenge ancient empires. They are frightened children, one council member said during a meeting. Let them build their toys. But a few delegates didn't laugh this time. The water being from Celeron watched the data carefully. Children grow, he said quietly, and frightened children often become the strongest. Still, the majority ignored the warning. Meanwhile, on Earth, the mood was shifting. Every news channel showed images of people working side by side, scientists in orbit stations, welders in moon docks, and families donating resources to support the fleet. It became something larger than any single government. It became humanity's shared dream. People stopped saying our world and started saying our home. Years passed. The first ships of the United Terran Fleet took flight. Their names were simple: Endeavor, Horizon, Dawnlight. They weren't the biggest ships in the galaxy, but they were built with something no other species had: human determination. The pilots who flew them weren't soldiers trained for centuries. They were regular people, test pilots, scientists, engineers, who believed that if the galaxy wanted to look down on them, they'd have to look up first. Then came the moment that changed everything. A distress signal came from a mining colony near the edge of the Sol Gate. The message was short and filled with fear. Unidentified ships had entered the system. Dravik ships, the Dravik Dominion, had returned. This time it wasn't an accident. They demanded Earth withdraw from space exploration beyond their allowed region. They claimed all nearby systems as their territory, even the empty ones. The Council told Earth to obey. "Do not provoke the Dominion," they said in their official message. "They are an old power. You are not ready." But Earth refused. In one of the most powerful speeches in human history, the leader of the United Earth Coalition stood before the world and said, "If the stars belong to anyone, they belong to all who reach for them. We will not bow to fear. We will not be told where we may exist." Across Earth, billions watched in silence, and then slowly they began to cheer. For the first time, humanity wasn't just defending a country. They were defending themselves as a species. The Dravik didn't wait. They sent a fleet of warships to make an example of Earth's arrogance. Everyone in the galaxy expected the same result as before. Humanity would be crushed, and the Council would continue to laugh. But that's not what happened. When the Dravik ships entered the Sol system, they found a human fleet waiting. The Endeavor stood at the front, its silver hull reflecting sunlight. The humans didn't have as many ships or as much firepower, but they had something else: creativity. Instead of direct combat, they used tactics no one had ever seen before. Their ships moved unpredictably, almost dancing through space. They used asteroids for cover, fake distress signals for confusion, and even self-repairing drones made from recycled metal. No alien fleet had ever fought an enemy that thought like this. The battle lasted only a few hours, but its outcome shook the galaxy. When it ended, the Dravik fleet retreated, damaged, confused, and humiliated. Humanity had survived. Word spread faster than light. Every system, every race in the galaxy heard the same message. The humans fought back, and won. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. For the first time, they couldn't laugh. "How could this happen?" shouted one delegate. "They were supposed to be primitives." "They used unpredictable tactics," another replied. "No logic, no order, just chaos." "Chaos," murmured the water being again, "is their greatest weapon." The Council decided to send a formal investigation. Officially, they said it was to ensure peace, but everyone knew they were afraid. Meanwhile, on Earth, people didn't celebrate like conquerors. They mourned those they lost, repaired their ships, and went back to work. They didn't see themselves as heroes, only survivors. The victory changed them. Humanity had looked into the darkness of space and realized it could fight back. They had faced fear and come out stronger. In quiet corners of the planet, people began to understand that the stars were no longer symbols of mystery. They were part of their destiny. And in the outer colonies, workers painted a new phrase on the hulls of ships. We are human. We endure. The Galactic Council watched in silence. They couldn't deny it anymore. Humanity was growing, adapting, and learning faster than any species they had ever seen. For centuries, the Council had ruled without challenge. But now whispers began to spread across the galaxy. Small races, long oppressed by the older empires, started to hope. If humans could stand up to the Dominion, maybe they could too. In the deep halls of the Dravic Dominion, rage burned. They couldn't believe they had been defeated by what they saw as lesser beings. They began to rebuild, plotting their revenge. But by then it was already too late. The spark had been lit. The humans had done the impossible, not just surviving, but inspiring others. They had shown that even a young race could stand equal among the stars. And though the Galactic Council tried to restore order, something inside the galaxy had changed forever. From that day on, every time a council delegate said, "They're just humans," there was no laughter, only silence, and the quiet understanding that those words no longer meant what they used to. Far away, Earth's shipyards glowed brighter each night, building faster, stronger vessels. The United Terran fleet expanded not for war, but for defense and for exploration. Humanity had stepped into the galactic stage not as a child asking for permission, but as a force that refused to be ignored, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, began to change because of them. The galaxy had gone quiet after the first human victory. The Dravic Dominion, the great empire that had once ruled half the outer rim, had been forced to retreat. The Galactic Council didn't know what to do. For thousands of years, the balance of power had never changed. Every species knew its place. Every rule had been written and followed. But then came the humans, a species that ignored every rule the Council believed in. The Council gathered once more in their grand hall, surrounded by golden light and endless holographic maps. The delegates were restless. Some were angry, others simply confused. How did they do it? One asked, his crystal-like body flickering with frustration. How can a species that was barely capable of interstellar travel stand against the Dravic? Another delegate answered sharply, "Luck, nothing more. The humans are reckless. Their actions are not strategy. They are desperation." "Desperation," said the water being from Silaran, his voice calm but firm, "is the seed of innovation. They learn fast because they have to." His words went largely unheard. The Council voted once again to keep humans under watchful observation. No interference, no alliance, no trade, just surveillance. They believed the Dravic would handle the problem soon enough, but they were wrong again. While the Council talked, Earth was moving forward faster than anyone could have imagined. The United Terran fleet had grown, not from greed, but from unity. Every nation on Earth contributed: technology, materials, knowledge, and most importantly, people. The fleet became more than a military force. It was a symbol of human progress. Children grew up watching ships launch into space, carrying explorers, scientists, and workers who built new colonies among the stars. Humanity's dream was no longer just to survive. It was to belong, to prove that they deserved their place in the galaxy. But not everyone shared that dream. The Dravic Dominion, humiliated by their loss, began plotting revenge. They told the Council that humanity had broken several galactic laws by expanding into protected zones. In truth, those zones were empty. No life, no settlements, nothing. But the Dominion didn't care. They wanted justification to strike back. The Council listened, though not all agreed. Some believed it was time to open communication with Earth and bring them into the galactic community peacefully. Others, especially the older species, feared change. "They are dangerous," said one of the older Council members, his deep voice echoing. "They act without permission. They challenge order. If we let them continue, chaos will spread, and so the Council voted to send a message. an order for Earth to stop expanding. On Earth, the message was received by the communication station orbiting Mars. It was written in formal galactic code. Cold and distant, it read, "Humanity is to cease all territorial expansion beyond the Sol region. The Galactic Council warns that further action will be considered aggression." The message was debated for days. Many on Earth wanted to comply to avoid war, but others believed that obedience would mean the end of human freedom. One of the senior fleet officers spoke during the global broadcast. "If the Council truly believes we are a threat," he said, "then the problem isn't what we've done, it's what they fear we might become. And I say let them see what we can become." The message spread everywhere. It wasn't shouted with anger, and it was said with quiet pride. The people of Earth agreed they would continue their mission. They wouldn't conquer. They would explore. The Galactic Council's silence after that was long and heavy. Months later, the Dravic Dominion decided to take matters into their own hands. Without approval, they sent a large fleet toward one of humanity's new colonies near Proxima Centauri. Their goal was simple: destroy it as a warning to Earth. But when they arrived, they didn't find a weak outpost or frightened settlers. They found the Terran fleet waiting for them again, larger, faster, and more advanced than before. Humans had learned from every encounter, every failure, every mistake. Their ships no longer moved like clumsy machines. They moved with precision and purpose. Each battle was a lesson, each loss a blueprint for improvement. And when the Dravic opened fire, the humans didn't panic. They adapted. Instead of fighting for glory or control, they fought to protect their people. The battle lasted hours, and though many ships were damaged, humanity stood firm once again. When the Dravic finally retreated, their own soldiers began to question everything. How could a species so young defeat them twice? The news of the second human victory spread even faster than the first. Across the galaxy, people whispered the same question: who are these humans? Smaller races, long ignored or oppressed by the great empires, began to watch Earth with hope. For generations, they had lived under rules made by others. Now they saw a species that refused to be told where it could go or what it could be. The Council tried to calm the rumors, but the truth couldn't be contained. Humanity was no longer an unknown. They were a symbol of resistance, of freedom, of possibility. Back on Earth, things were changing too. The fleet grew not just in size but in spirit. The engineers who once dreamed of flying were now designing living ecosystems on ships. Farmers grew crops in zero gravity. Teachers gave lessons to children on space stations orbiting alien suns. Humanity was spreading life wherever it went, life filled with curiosity, laughter, and stubbornness. The Council sent spies to learn more. What they found surprised them. They expected a civilization building weapons and preparing for conquest. Instead, they found people singing in orbit, children painting stars on walls, scientists naming planets after music and poetry. One of the spies, after returning, said quietly to the Council, "They don't see space as a battlefield. They see it as a home." But even as admiration grew, so did fear. The older species worried that the galaxy's order would collapse. The humans didn't follow the Council's ancient systems or laws. They didn't use the same trade routes or hierarchies. They made their own path, and others were beginning to follow. Protests began on some worlds where smaller races demanded independence. Many of them carried banners with Earth's flag, calling themselves Friends of Humanity. The Council panicked. In a desperate attempt to restore control, they held a grand assembly and declared that human expansion beyond agreed zones will not be tolerated. They didn't dare attack Earth directly, but they hoped the threat would slow them down. It didn't. If anything, it made humanity stronger. The people of Earth had seen too much, lost too much, and grown too much to turn back. They weren't fighting to rule anyone. They were fighting for the right to stand as equals. When the next council session began, the water being from Silaran spoke again. "You cannot stop them with fear," he said. "You cannot stop humans at all. The more you push them, the more they rise." The hall went silent. No one argued this time. Deep down, they knew it was true. Meanwhile, in the outer colonies, humanity kept moving forward. They built new alliances, not through force, but through kindness. They helped rebuild planets destroyed by war. They shared technology freely with smaller civilizations. They treated strangers like friends. Slowly, the image of the dangerous humans began to fade. replaced by another idea, the unstoppable humans. And yet, there were still whispers of worry in the council halls. What happens when they become powerful enough to challenge us? One delegate asked. The answer came from an unexpected place, a young aide from one of the smaller worlds who had been silently observing the debate. He said softly, "Maybe they already have." Not with weapons, but with courage. His words spread through the chamber like a quiet wave. That day, the council didn't vote on anything. They simply sat in silence, each one thinking about the same truth. The humans had changed the galaxy, not because they conquered it, but because they inspired it. And somewhere far beyond the council's reach, a new human ship launched into the unknown. Its engines glowed bright against the darkness, leaving behind a message painted on its hull, the same words that now echoed across the stars. We are human. We endure. The council still called them unpredictable. The Dravik still called them dangerous. But those who had seen the humans up close called them something else. Hope. And the galaxy, for the first time in ages, began to wonder not if humanity would survive, but how far they would go. After the second Dravik defeat, the galaxy was no longer the same. The whispers had turned into open discussions. Every planet, every colony, every council chamber was filled with one question: what will the humans do next? For the first time, in galactic history, a young species had forced the ancient empires to pay attention. The Dravik Dominion had lost its pride, and the Galactic Council had lost its control. The humans had not only survived, they had proven that courage, unity, and imagination could change everything. But with that victory came something humanity had not expected: fear. Across the stars, powerful empires began to view Earth as a potential threat. They remembered how quickly humans learned, how fiercely they fought, and how they never gave up. To them, that kind of determination was dangerous, and so the council called another emergency meeting. The chamber was filled with tension. The delegates' colors glowed in the dim light: blues, greens, silvers, and golds. Some were angry, others afraid. The Dravik representative spoke first, his voice sharp. "These humans are not ready for the responsibility of power," he said. "They are emotional, unpredictable, and driven by pride. If we do not act now, they will one day challenge us all." Several delegates nodded in agreement. Others stayed silent. They had seen the reports, footage of humans helping rebuild, destroyed colonies, sharing technology with struggling species, and protecting trade routes from pirates. "They have done no harm since the battles," said one soft-spoken delegate. "They defend, they build, they explore. They do not conquer." "Not yet," the Dravik replied coldly, "but give them time." The council decided to send an invitation to Earth, not as a threat, but as a test. They called it a summit, though everyone knew it was more like a trial. The humans were asked to attend and explain their actions before the full assembly. When the message reached Earth, the news spread instantly. People had mixed feelings. Some believed this was a chance for peace, to finally be recognized as equals. Others warned that the council would try to humiliate them, or worse, set rules to keep humanity under control. Still, the decision was made. Humanity would go. The day of the summit was one the galaxy would never forget. From every corner of known space, representatives arrived at the council's massive space station, a place so large it could hold entire cities. The air shimmered with tension as the humans' ship appeared, sleek, silver, and calm. It was escorted by two small Terran fleet vessels, not for intimidation but for dignity. When the human delegation entered the hall, the crowd went silent. Many expected arrogance, but what they saw instead were people who looked both humble and strong, dressed simply, walking with quiet confidence. Their faces carried the weight of everything their species had been through, centuries of struggle, division, and triumph. They took their seats in the center of the hall, surrounded by hundreds of alien eyes. The council speaker began the hearing. "People of Earth," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "you stand accused of violating territorial boundaries and disrupting galactic stability. What do you have to say in your defense?" There was a long silence. Then the lead, human representative stood and spoke slowly, clearly, and without anger. "We did not come here to threaten anyone," they said. "We came here to live, to explore, and to learn. Every step we have taken has been in the open. Every battle we fought was to protect our people, not to conquer others. If that is a crime, then perhaps your laws are broken, not us." The hall buzzed with murmurs. Some delegates looked offended, others looked thoughtful. The human continued, "You call us emotional, unpredictable, reckless. Maybe that's true, but those same emotions, our curiosity, our love, our need to protect each other, are what made us survive. We have no ancient power, we have no endless history, but we have something you seem to have forgotten, the will to change." The words hung in the air like a quiet storm. No one had ever spoken to the council like that, not with anger, but with truth. Then the human placed a small holographic device on the table. The air shimmered and images appeared. Destroyed ships, burnt colonies, and frightened civilians from the Dravik attacks. "These are not stories," the human said. "These are lives. This is why we fought. We didn't want war, but we will not bow to those who bring it to us." A silence followed that no one dared break. The Dravik delegate shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Slowly, one by one, other delegates began to speak. A representative from a small mining world said, "Humans helped us rebuild our habitat when the Dravik ignored our cries for help. They asked for nothing in return." Another, from a desert moon, added, "They shared their medical technology with us. My people owe them our lives." The council chamber, once so proud, began to murmur with something new. Not fear, not anger, but respect. For the first time in history, the council saw humans not as intruders, but as equals. The debate continued for hours. Some still distrusted humanity, others defended them fiercely, but no one could deny what they had become. By the end of the day, the council voted, and Earth was granted observer status. Humanity now had a voice in the Galactic Council. It wasn't a full membership, but it was a beginning. A small light in a galaxy that had long forgotten what hope felt like. When the human delegation returned to their ship, messages from across the stars flooded their channels. Small civilizations sent greetings thanking them for standing up to the old powers. Many asked for alliances, not for war, but for cooperation and protection. Something beautiful had begun. Back on Earth, people celebrated, not with fireworks or grand speeches, but with quiet pride. They knew the journey wasn't over. They had been seen, heard, and finally, respected. But deep down, they also knew peace would not last forever. The Dravik Dominion would not forgive this humiliation. In the shadows of space, their fleets began to gather again, fueled by revenge and jealousy. The Dravik leaders swore that the next time they met humanity, they would not make the same mistake. But humans were not the same as before either. They had friends now. They had allies, small worlds, free colonies, and new partners who believed in them. For the first time, the galaxy's balance had shifted. The empires of old were trembling, and the people once ignored were rising. A new era had begun, one not ruled by fear but by hope. And as the stars glittered above, a young technician aboard the flagship looked out from a viewing window. "Do you think they'll ever stop underestimating us?" they asked softly. Another smiled. "I hope they never do," they said, "because every time they underestimate us, we surprise them again." In that moment, Earth ships moved quietly through the darkness, carrying explorers, builders, and dreamers. They weren't chasing conquest or power. They were chasing meaning. They knew there would be more battles ahead, maybe even darker days. But for now, they had done something incredible. They had stood before the oldest powers in the galaxy and made them listen. And somewhere deep, in the heart of space, on a quiet planet far from any map, a small child from another race looked up at the stars and whispered to her father, "I want to be like the humans." Her father smiled. "Then learn from them," he said, "because they've reminded us all what it means to be alive." And so, while the Council tried to recover its pride, and while the Dravik planned their revenge, humanity continued forward, building, exploring, and dreaming. Because that's what humans do. They fall, they rise, and they keep moving. Always forward, always together. And the galaxy, though it didn't realize it yet, had already begun to change forever. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had something the others had forgotten. A heart that refused to give up. After Earth's new position in the Galactic Council, there was a short period of calm. Trade ships began to travel between systems. Small worlds that had once feared the great empires started to open their doors to human visitors. Everywhere the humans went, they left something behind. Hope, laughter, curiosity. They didn't come as conquerors. They came as friends, teachers, and helpers. But far away in the deep red light of the Dravik home system, anger was growing. The Dravik Dominion had been silent since their second defeat. On the surface, they appeared calm, but behind closed doors they were rebuilding, training, and preparing. They could not accept that a young species, one they had called primitive, had stood against them twice. To them, it was a wound that could only be healed with revenge. The Dravik leaders decided to make an example of humanity. They began to spread lies through the galactic network that the humans were planning to take over the Council, that they were secretly building weapons, that they intended to control the smaller races. Some believed the lies. Fear has always been easier to believe than truth. The Galactic Council called for investigation, but before anything could be done, the Dravik made their move. Without warning, their fleets jumped across several systems at once. Dozens of human colonies and allied worlds went dark within hours. Communication lines failed, trade routes vanished, and panic spread across the stars. It was the largest attack in known history, but even in that chaos, humanity did what it always did best. It united. The call went out across every human settlement. Stand together. Within days, the united Terran fleet reassembled. Old ships were pulled from dockyards, new ships rushed to completion, and civilians volunteered to help. It wasn't about war anymore, and it was about survival. Every human, no matter where they were, felt the same thing. They would not run. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council tried to remain neutral, as they always did. They debated endlessly, hiding behind rules and procedures. But this time something was different. The smaller worlds, and the ones humanity had helped, stood up. They demanded the Council act. They refused to stay silent while innocent lives were destroyed. And when the Council hesitated, they turned to Earth instead. Within a week, ships from 27 different races arrived in human-controlled space. Volunteers, refugees, and allies who refused to bow to the old powers. Together, they formed what became known as the Coalition of Free Worlds. The stage was set for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. The Dravik fleet moved fast, confident in their numbers and their power. Their ships were massive and terrifying, dark like shadows in the void. They believed the humans would scatter, surrender, or hide behind the Council's rules. But they forgot one simple truth. Humans don't surrender. When the Dravik reached the neutral planet of Sithra, a world filled with ancient ruins and history, they found the Coalition waiting for them. The humans had chosen the battlefield carefully. Sithra was sacred ground to many species, a place where no empire had ever dared to fight. Humanity had made it stand there for one reason: to show that this wasn't just their fight. It was for everyone who had ever been told to stay small. The two sides faced each other across the void. Thousands of ships, millions of lives, all waiting for one signal. And then it began. The sky above Sithra lit up with energy as the first wave of fire cut through the darkness. The Dravik came in heavy, confident in their numbers. But humanity fought differently. They didn't follow the usual patterns or predictable tactics. They moved like artists, fluid, creative, surprising. They used small ships to distract larger ones, decoys that mimicked entire fleets, and drones that carried shields instead of weapons. Every maneuver was strange, unexpected, and perfectly timed. Alien observers watching from afar couldn't understand how humans fought. There was no single logic, no perfect formation. Their strategy was emotion, a mix of instinct, courage, and improvisation that no computer could ever predict. The battle raged for hours, stretching into days. Ships burned, worlds trembled, and the Council watched helplessly as history unfolded before their eyes. But in the middle of all that destruction, something remarkable happened. The coalition didn't fall apart. Even when communication broke down, they helped one another. Human pilots risked their lives to protect ships from other species. Engineers from other worlds repaired human vessels mid-battle. It wasn't about who came from where. It was about standing together. On the second day of fighting, the Dravik fleet began to break. Their leaders couldn't understand why the humans wouldn't retreat. Even when they were outnumbered, they kept coming. Every time a ship fell, 2 more appeared to take its place. By the third day, the Dravik realized they couldn't win. They tried to retreat, but it was too late. The coalition surrounded them, not to destroy them, but to end the fight. When the battle finally stopped, the silence that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. The war was over. The Dravik fleet, once thought unbeatable, was gone. And so was the illusion that the old powers would always rule. News spread like light. Across the galaxy, oppressed worlds celebrated, the council chambers filled with stunned faces. Some delegates wept openly. Others simply stared at the screens in disbelief. The humans had done it again, not for conquest, but for freedom. After the victory, the coalition ships gathered above Sithra. The humans sent a single transmission to every world in the galaxy. The message was short, spoken by a calm, steady voice. We did not fight to rule. We fought to live. We fought so that no world, human or not, would ever have to kneel again. That message was replayed for centuries after. In the days that followed, something beautiful happened. Worlds that had been silent for generations began to speak again. Small civilizations that had hidden from the empires came out of the shadows. Trade, communication, and trust began to flow where fear had once lived. The Galactic Council was forced to change. They could no longer ignore the humans or the new alliances. For the first time in history, the council chambers opened to every race, not just the oldest or the richest. The humans didn't demand control. They demanded fairness. They became the voice of those who had none. Back on Earth, there was no celebration, no parades. The people were tired. Too many lives had been lost, too many homes destroyed. But when they looked up at the night sky, they knew it had been worth it. The stars, once symbols of mystery and fear, now felt like home. The old maps of the galaxy were rewritten. New routes were marked, not borders, but connections. And in the center of it all, the planet Earth became a symbol, not of power, but of possibility. The Dravik Dominion was not destroyed. They were humbled. Their leaders were forced to sit before the council and answer for their crimes. Humanity didn't seek revenge. They offered peace, when a chance to rebuild and change. Some called that foolish. Others called it wisdom. But that was the thing about humans. Even after pain, they still chose compassion. Years later, stories of the Battle of Sithra were told on hundreds of worlds. Children who had never seen Earth spoke of the humans as legends. Some believed they were myth, heroes from ancient tales. But those who had fought beside them knew the truth. Humans were not gods. They were not perfect. They were simply human, and somehow that was more powerful than anything else in the universe. In one quiet moment after the war, a young officer stood on the bridge of a ship, watching the stars. "Do you think it's over?" they asked. An older voice replied gently, "Peace never stays forever. But as long as someone remembers why we fought, it won't fade completely." The young officer nodded. "Then we'll remember." And so they did. From that day forward, the galaxy entered a new age, one not ruled by fear or blood, but by unity and understanding. The humans had proven something no one could deny, that even in a universe of countless species and endless stars, the heart of a single world could change everything. And when historians looked back at the records, they all agreed on one thing. The Battle of Sithra wasn't just a victory. It was the moment the galaxy remembered its soul. The war had ended, but the silence that followed felt almost unreal. After years of fear, destruction, and endless nights watching for enemy fleets, the stars were quiet again. The ships that once filled the skies now rested in orbit, damaged but alive. People across hundreds of worlds were slowly coming out of the shadows, stepping into the light of a new era, and at the heart of it all was Earth, the small blue planet that had changed the galaxy. The humans didn't call themselves heroes. They didn't make monuments or grand speeches. They were tired. Many had lost loved ones, homes, and entire cities. But they also knew something had shifted forever. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear. In the weeks that followed, the coalition of free worlds gathered once again, not for war, but for rebuilding. Representatives from every allied world came together, not as rulers or conquerors, but as equals. They met on a neutral planet chosen for its calm oceans and bright sky, a place that symbolized peace. There was no grand council hall this time. Instead, they sat beneath an open sky, surrounded by the sound of wind and water. The meeting began quietly. The human delegation spoke last, as they always did, not out of pride, but out of respect. When they stood, the entire crowd fell silent. "We've seen what power can do," the human speaker said. "We've seen how fear can destroy everything. If this new age is to mean anything, it must be built on trust, not control. We don't need empires anymore. We need understanding." There was no applause, no cheering, only a deep silence that felt like agreement. From that day forward, the coalition became something new. A council made of equals, where every world, big or small, had a voice. The Galactic Council that once ruled through pride and hierarchy slowly began to fade into history, replaced by something fairer and stronger. But rebuilding was not easy. Worlds scarred by war had to start over. Cities were in ruins. Trade routes were broken, and people were struggling to find hope again. Yet everywhere the humans went, they brought that spark back. Engineers worked side by side with alien builders to restore lost colonies. Human doctors shared their medical knowledge freely. Farmers from Earth traveled to distant planets, teaching new ways to grow crops in alien soil. They didn't ask for payment. They only asked that each world help another in return. And one by one, they did. Planets that had once been strangers now traded freely. Soldiers who once fought each other now worked together to rebuild homes. The galaxy, once divided by fear and arrogance, began to heal. In time, the Dravic Dominion sent envoys as well. They came quietly, humbled by defeat but curious about what humanity had built. When they arrived on Earth, they expected coldness or revenge. But instead, they were greeted with open hands. Humans didn't forget the war, but they chose not to carry its bitterness forward. The Dravic visitors were taken to see Earth, its forests, its oceans, its crowded cities full of laughter and noise. They were shocked. They had been told humans were violent and primitive, but what they saw were people who loved deeply, worked hard, and forgave easily. One of the Dravic envoys later said, "They are not dangerous because they are strong. They are dangerous because they care." And perhaps that was the truth of it all. Decades passed. Children who had been born during the war grew up in peace. Schools taught about the Battle of Sithra not as a story of victory, but as a lesson about unity, sacrifice, and the power of standing together. Statues weren't built for soldiers or leaders. They were built for those who had rebuilt homes, healed the injured, and carried hope where there was none. The stars that had once burned with the light of war now glittered with exploration ships, carrying scientists, artists, and dreamers instead of weapons. Humanity was no longer feared. They were admired, and yet even in peace they never forgot the past. Every year, on the day the war ended, Earth held a simple ceremony. People gathered around quiet memorials, no parades, no fanfare. They placed a single light for every world that had stood with them. The message engraved on the central stone read, "For every life lost, we built a future worth living for." In that quiet, children would ask their parents why the humans had fought. The answer was always the same. Because someone had to remind the galaxy what it means to care. And somewhere in the deep reaches of space, beyond the known worlds, human explorers continued their journey. They didn't go in search of power or treasure. They went to learn, to connect, and to see what other wonders the universe still held. They discovered new civilizations, each with their own stories, struggles, and dreams. And each time the humans introduced themselves with the same words. "We're from Earth, we're explorers. We come in peace." It became more than a greeting. It became a promise. The galaxy slowly changed in ways no one had predicted. Empires that had once believed only in strength now valued cooperation. Worlds that had hidden in fear now shared their knowledge openly. Trade, art, and science flourished, and yet among all that progress, the humans remained the same: curious, emotional, unpredictable, and full of heart. They laughed loudly. They argued passionately. They made mistakes and learned from them. But most of all, they kept caring, even when it wasn't easy. In time, the story of how the humans had risen became legend. Across the stars, people told it in different ways. Some said they were warriors. Others said they were philosophers. Others called them dreamers. But the truth was simpler. They were just people, flawed, hopeful, and endlessly determined. Years later, on a quiet night, an old human pilot sat on the balcony of a small home built on another world. He looked up at the sky, watching distant lights blink across the darkness. A young child from that planet sat beside him, eyes wide with wonder. "Are those stars where your people came from?" the child asked. The old pilot smiled softly. "No," he said. "Those are the places we've been. The stars we came from are much smaller, just one tiny blue world." The child tilted their head. "How did your people do all of this?" The pilot thought for a long moment before answering. "We didn't know we could," he said. "We just refused to stop trying." And that was the secret the galaxy had finally learned, that humanity's greatest power was not its technology or its weapons, but its heart. They could lose everything and still find a reason to start again. They could be beaten, broken, and forgotten, yet still rise stronger. The Galactic Council's old motto had once been, "Order through power." But in the new age, it was replaced with something different, words first spoken by a human after the war. "We are not defined by what we destroy, but by what we protect." Those words spread through every world, written on walls, spoken in songs, and taught to children. They became the guiding light of a new era, one where power meant compassion and leadership meant service. The galaxy was still full of dangers, mysteries, and the unknown. But now, when ships set sail across the endless dark, they did so with courage, just because they knew that somewhere, humans had once stood against the impossible and changed everything. And as the centuries passed, the legend of that small blue planet grew. Some forgot the details of the wars, the names of the leaders, or the dates of the battles, but they never forgot the feeling. The feeling that even in the darkest times, someone had dared to hope. The galaxy had seen countless empires rise and fall, but the spirit of humanity, that restless, stubborn, endlessly hopeful spark, and endured, because that was what made them human, not their weapons, not their science, but their heart. And somewhere, far from any council or city, a ship drifted silently through the stars. Its crew, a mix of humans and other species, looked out at a new system, their eyes full of wonder. A soft voice broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever stop exploring?" Another voice, warm and calm, answered, "Not as long as there's a sky above us." The ship turned toward the light of a new sun, engines glowing softly, and disappeared into the horizon. And just like that, the story of humanity continued, not as conquerors, not as survivors, but as something far greater, as a reminder to the universe that sometimes the smallest voice can change the loudest world. They were, after all, just humans, and somehow, that was more than enough.